no airbags, no ABS, and no child seat, and they call it a Volvo? That's this week on Motoring 97.
TSN's Motoring 97 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And Midas, the way it should be.
This is the new Highway 407. It stretches about 36 kilometers across the top of Toronto, just north of the 401. Now, if you don't live in this area, you're saying, who cares? Well, Mr. Kenzie thinks we should all care. And later on, he's going to bring his soapbox out here and tell us why he is convinced this highway represents the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to highway construction. But first, we're going to check out this brand new Volvo 850. It's a nice machine. In fact, it was our car of the year in 1994. But as we're about to see, Volvo and other manufacturers like BMW, Audi, and Renault are now part of a series that has become the hottest racing series in Europe.
Kelvin Burt is trying to go through on the inside, and is he doing it? Yes! Burt goes through in the Volvo. Rivalia tries to retake the place on the inside, but as they turn into Luffield, the double right-hander, Burt has got the line and keeps the place.
Although Formula One racing gets all the ink, most racing fans in Europe will tell you that touring car racing is more exciting and certainly more competitive.
And Rydell goes past Rivalia up into third place. Superb. Just drives past the Venetian on a perfect line.
This footage is from the British Touring Car Championship Series. Volvo races two 850s in the series with drivers Ricard Rydell and Kelvin Burt. Recently, Motoring 97 caught up with Burt after he accepted an invitation by Volvo Canada to showcase his 850 at the Shannonville racetrack near Belleville, Ontario. It also afforded Burt a chance to describe this style of racing.
If a North American's ever been to London and been in the rush hour in a cab, and imagine 30 of those doing 200 kilometres, 120 miles an hour, and that close together. That's quite a good approximation of how it is, especially in the beginning of the race, the first few laps when the field's all closed up together. But touring car racing is very, very professional now, and it used to be a formula where older drivers gathered and finished their careers in their 40s and 50s. And the pace wasn't that hot, but nowadays there are a lot of professional teams, there are a lot of young professional drivers making a career out of it, and the pace is very hot, the competition is very close. The basis of the car is a shell off the production line, off the Volvo production line, is a stripped out shell, so yeah, it starts life as it could have ended up as somebody's road car, somebody's street car. It's built around purpose-built racing suspension and fully tuned racing engine, but the racing engine block is based on the standard block. The whole layout of the car has to mirror the standard product. It has to keep its transverse engine, it has to keep its front-wheel drive, it has to keep the same type of suspension. We're allowed 6 gears, 6-speed gearbox, which is a racing gearbox, but it's quite closely based on a production machine. That's the key thing, is the cars are very heavy. We're driving them very closely together and we're trying to outbrake each other, and we're giving each other very little room on the circuit. If you make a mistake, there's a lot of momentum there. The thing weighs 1,000 kilos, so a small mistake can have quite a big effect.
The best quote I've heard on how good British Touring Car Championship racing is that the woman that runs Brands Hatch in England, one of the most famous tracks there, was asked if she'd ever run another Formula One race at Brands Hatch. And she said, only if I could make as much money as I do in a BTCC race. The fans love it. They love it because it's competitive. You never know who's going to win. There's lots of action. There's passing. The teams are factory supported. They're all well turned out. It's just a really, really good package.
Volvo have got a big investment here, and it's important for them that it's successful, but I never think about that when I'm driving. I just concentrate on the circuit and the car and how I'm driving it. I don't feel it as pressure. I'm just doing my job. I love racing and I'm good at it. That's my opinion anyway. You better ask the Volvo boss, but the pressure doesn't get to me.
A North American Touring Car Championship debuted last summer with 2 stops in Canada. And there has been speculation that the European Series might make an appearance on this side of the pond.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I mean, I've been racing 10 years in England now and I'm fed up with the circuits. The same 6 or 8 circuits, good as they are. It's hard to get up in the morning and go to the same place for the 250th time. No, it'd be great. I love going to new circuits. Good challenge.
Up next, the Chevrolet Venture, a van that no longer looks like a hound on the scent. On this edition of Test Drive, we take a look at the replacement for the General's Dustbuster. Dustbuster, you say? Yes, indeed. This is the 1997 Chevrolet Venture, the replacement for the lost and hardly lamented Lumina van. Beneath the hood is an engine that is as sweet as a nut. While the 3.4 litre V6 is not what you could call technically sophisticated, it has the desired effect. Power is rated at 180 horsepower at 5200 RPM, while torque tips the scales at a very usable 205 pounds-feet at 4000. As is common on GM engines, the tip-in is early, meaning that the slightest touch of the go pedal results in motion. Goose it and the Venture scoots off the mark in fine fashion, even when loaded. The mid-range performance is also better. Getting from 80 to 120 kilometers an hour is accomplished in about 8 seconds, meaning that you can merge with highway traffic in complete safety. When I brought the Venture home, the kids thought that I was somewhat of a wizard because all they had to say was "open sesame" and the car obeyed. Well, I got to thinking about some of the safety ramifications. What happens if little fingers or a small head get jammed between the door and the door jamb? Well, on this vehicle it's not a problem. The balloon represents little fingers. There's not enough pressure to crush little fingers, nor is there to pop that balloon, so it doesn't represent a danger. The Venture is suspended on McPherson struts at the front end and an open section twist axle with gas shocks at the back end. To add the requisite control, there are roll bars both back and front. What goes sight unseen is that the Venture is now made of metal. The plastic panels have gone, and as a result the structure is appreciably stiffer. The handling characteristics are also better than I expected. While you must take it easy because of the tall stance, the roll bars do a good job of keeping the vehicle near vertical in corners. The interesting part in all of this is that the ride and handling characteristics do not deteriorate as you load the van up. Many lesser designs get stiffer and begin to understeer noticeably as the weight increases. Of all the improvements that GM have engineered into the Venture, perhaps none are as significant as the fact that now the top of the dash won't accommodate a family of 4. In doing that, they've done away with these horrible triangulated windows at the front. In winter they get covered in salt and snow, which effectively restricted your peripheral vision. On the Venture, the view forward is much better thanks to the deletion of these things. Stopping power comes from a front disc rear drum design with full anti-lock. The stopping distance is average 119 feet from 80 kilometers an hour. Impressive, yes, but the fact that the Venture has a half-decent pedal feel is an unexpected bonus. In the past, I've disliked the mushy pedal feel so common in many of GM's vehicles. The Venture has benefited from the makeover primarily because all of the ergonomic nightmare that used to form the driver's environment has gone. In the back here, there's more coffee cup holders than you can shake a stick at, and when I say that, there's more than 2 per person. The other thing, auxiliary heater and radio controls. Now the neat part about these radio controls, the kids can be listening to Coolio, while I, on the other hand, listen to the Supreme Bag Team. Elsewhere, the Venture offers analog instrumentation, plenty of storage compartments, 26 to be exact, and a nifty net that stops anything placed between the seats disappearing every time you start and stop. Finally, the Venture will hold a 4x8 sheet. About time if you ask me. In releasing the Venture, GM have upped the ante in the minivan market. They've successfully combined the ride quality of the Ford Windstar with the practicality and versatility of the Caravan, and they've done so at a very reasonable price. As the seasons change, so does the personality of the Pathfinder. In the autumn months we enjoy drifting around corners and the sports car-like handling. However, as the weather has deteriorated, so has the Pathfinder's ability to grip the road. With all the camera gear aboard, the Klondike is as sure-footed as it is in the dry. Minus the additional weight, you have to be very gentle on the gas. While rear-drive cars are renowned for being a handful in bad weather, the inescapable conclusion is that we must either add some permanent weight or change the rubber. Now my money's on the latter. On the next update, we look at the joys of off-roading, Klondike style. Spied at last, the long-awaited Boxster Roadster will actually hit the road after first being shown at the North American Auto Show. This is the first all-new offering from Porsche in the past 18 years. True to Porsche law, the Boxster features a horizontally opposed Boxster engine, although for the first time it's going to be liquid-cooled. The reason for this is the manner in which the engine is packaged. It sits midship and is completely boxed in beneath the convertible top. Indeed, to check the oil, you must open the trunk. Worthy of note is the body's rigidity. There is little cowl shake. This and the legendary handling characteristics allow the Boxster to corner like the Dickens. The only question left to be answered, is the Boxster a true Porsche? We'll have the answer on a future test drive.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns body cladding. A lot of today's cars and light trucks come with a rather large lower body cladding, and in many cases you don't have a choice of whether you get it or not. Jeep Grand Cherokees, for example, have a beautiful, large, soft lower cladding on the doors that protects the side of the vehicle from stone chips coming from the wheels and tires, and it also protects the door from door dents and dings from other vehicles. It's functional and decorative. This Buick Regal, for example, has one that's vinyl and a combination of vinyl and stainless steel, so it's decorative and protective. However, it can work against you in our climate. For example, dirt and salt can get in behind the cladding, rub the paint through, and cause corrosion. Here's a perfect example in this car. You can see that somebody's removed the shiny or stainless steel portion of this cladding and the vinyl cladding from the driver's door, and you can see that they've touched up two locations right here where it was rusting. The rust was probably emanating from that rivet right there. And you can see the different color of paint that they've touched it up. Over here you can see a little bit of rust sneaking up above the cladding right here. The trick to these vehicles is a couple of times a year, take some rust inhibitor and spray it down in behind the cladding to inhibit the corrosion that's inevitable with this type of a system. That's your Midas tip of the week.
A portion of Motoring 97 is brought to you by the Solder Seal Gunk family of automotive products, makers of Puncture Seal Gold and Liquid Wrench.
When the sun is shining, you can bet a group of students from the University of Western Ontario will be outside taking full advantage of the warm rays, but not at the beach. These students are members of the Sunstang Solar Car Project. The vehicle was first conceived as an honors research project for engineering students in 1991. The team placed 40th out of 53 teams at the 93 World Solar Championships. Now, students have designed and manufactured a third-generation vehicle as they prepare for the next World Solar Challenge, a grueling 3,000-kilometer odyssey across the Australian outback.
My interest is to come up with an opportunity for students to be able to do something quite significant in engineering, to be able to bring in all their design skills onto a very difficult type of a project. And this is really it. It's truly a brain sport. And this gives these students an opportunity then to try out all their skills in engineering and compete with some of the world's best designers.
Now gone from 4 wheels to 3 wheels because that lightens the car up a little bit because you don't have an extra suspension member or an extra wheel dragging on the ground. We've also changed our solar cells quite a bit. Another big change is our steering. We used to have the conventional steering wheel, and now we went to a push-pull lever, which would make it so much easier. As I was a driver in 1993, 95, and 96, it's so much easier to have something right in front of you when the car is so low to the ground. We have 8 square meters of solar cells. They're blue. They convert the sunlight into electricity. And what we do with the electricity is that we route it directly to a battery pack, and then from the battery pack it goes to our different systems like the motor, the turn signals. So Mainly it's solar with the battery backup.
The main thing for this car is it has to be very efficient. 70% of the energy that's required to drive this vehicle goes into aerodynamics, and that's aerodynamic drag. The rest is all rolling resistance. So therefore, you need a really good aerodynamic body that is sealed from the outside, and you need to have wheels that roll really well as the bearing system that goes with it. And we've used bicycle tires in the past, and they blow pretty quickly. We have now a new Michelin solar car tire that is just prime for this. It's designed for solar cars, and it lasts as well as its low and rolling resistance.
This car can actually now maintain an average speed of approaching 100 kilometers an hour. So we're hoping that we can at least jump up higher than everybody else and maybe get top 20.
They used to say that Volvos are pretty dull cars to drive. In fact, the most exciting thing about a Volvo was the fact that it was renowned for having squealing brakes. Well, Volvo has solved that problem, but many others haven't. And that's exactly what Bill Gardner wants to talk about this week.
Well, Brad, in all fairness to Volvo, I'll tell you something, squealing brakes were not the exclusive territory of Volvo. We've had all kinds of different makes and models of cars do it over the years. It's a really annoying problem. First off, a couple of things we should mention. Almost all of today's cars that have disc brake systems, the vast majority of them, have some kind of an audible wear indicator built into their front brake pads. So if all of a sudden you pick up squealing brakes and you never had this squealing problem before, if you haven't had a brake job done for quite some time, you've probably gotten down to that wear indicator. You should get the car in, get the front wheels or all the wheels pulled off for that matter, get the brake system inspected because you may have worn out pads. However, if you've done a recent brake job and you've picked up a squeal, or you know that you've got lots of material left on that brake system and you've got a squealing problem, there may be something you can do about it. Now, there are TSBs or technical service bulletins from a lot of the manufacturers telling you that on a perfectly functioning disc brake system, a certain amount of squeal may be expected and it may be unavoidable. And that's quite often true. But there may be something you can do about it, and it all hinges around your selection of brake pads. The better quality brake pads have material on them to help inhibit or suppress the tendency of disc brake systems to squeal. We're going to go to the bench and show that to you. I've got 3 brake pads here on the bench. They're from different types of cars, so the size and shape is different. But what I want you to pay attention to is the style of the brake pad, particularly in the back side of the pad. Now, here in the front is the friction material that actually is up against our disc brake rotor. But here on the back of the pad is where the battle is won or lost as far as squealing goes. And this GM factory original pad, this is the inboard pad from that Buick that we had on the hoist a minute ago. And you can see that it's got a silencer or shim on the back side of the pad that's integral with the pad. It's underneath those rivets and it's adhered tightly to the back of the pad. And that little silencer shim is what prevents the majority of our disc brake noise from occurring. Now, if we move over here to this is a premium quality aftermarket pad from another GM car. This happens to be from a rear-wheel drive car. But you can see that they've painted their backing plate and that they give you an adhesive shim to go on the back of it. Now what you do is peel off this wax paper on the back. You just peel it back and stick this on to the back of the brake pad. Now that works pretty well. The only problem being that eventually these things tend to bunch up and migrate their way off quite often before the pad is worn out. So the silencer is no longer effective, and at that point you pick up the brake squeal. Now this is a less expensive pad over here. They don't give you any gasket or insulator shim for the back, but they do give you a little package of EMP. That's elastomeric polymer. It's a liquid goop that you put on the back of the brake pad. You allow it to cure a little bit. It's quite thick, quite viscous. You put it on the back, allow it to cure, and then install the brake pad. And on this particular brake pad, it's got some tabs or ears on the corner, and you can crimp those down to make the pad a tight fit in the caliper, because another situation that occurs is if the brake pad is loose in the caliper and it wiggles around, it will make a chirping or squeaking sound right there. The steel in the back of the brake pad against the iron of the caliper will make a chirping or squealing sound. So if you have that provision, you should try and adjust these when you install them so they're a nice snug fit. Now there's a lot of other factors involved with disc brake noise. Many factors can be involved here. If you've got parts problems or the wrong finish on the brake rotors, this can create this squeal problem as well. But by and large, the battle is won or lost at the back of the brake pad, and the better quality brake pads either come with a silencer already installed or one in the package that you can put on. If you use these brake pads, and you have to ask for original equipment pads quite often from the dealer to get the proper setup, that'll take care of the majority of your brake noise. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 97.
Where's that soapbox Brad promised me? You know, that's not the only mistake that's been made with this 407 highway. That's coming up next on Kenzie's Corner. You know, the only real problem with making a mistake is failing to learn from it. And judging from recent experience, the province of Ontario hasn't learned from their previous mistakes on how to build highways. They've just spent gazillions of tax dollars putting concrete barriers in the median of the 401 freeway to the east and west of Toronto. Why? To keep cars from sliding through the median and hitting oncoming traffic head on. Now they're just putting the finishing touches on this brand new 407 highway. Guess what? No median barriers. Also no guardrails for most of the light standards and bridge abutments. Now it's the Ontario Provincial Police who've blown the safety whistle on this project before it opened. They're the ones, after all, that have to scrape the bodies out of the wreckage and, worse still, tell the families of the victims. Now the Ministry of Transportation says the road meets all their safety standards, that they only need guardrails if the object's less than 10 meters from the road. Well, geez, at 100 kilometers an hour, a car travels 10 meters in less than 4/10 of a second. Fat lot of good that'll do you. And subsequent investigation has shown that even some of these standards have been compromised for this road. Some of the objects are less than 7 meters from the road, the on-ramps are too tightly radiused, and some of the merge lanes are too short. The heavy trucks that'll be big users of this road, well, they're going to have a field day with that. You know, this road is not being built by the province, but by a consortium of private construction companies. And the $300 million they're allegedly saving by some of these cuts, well, it goes straight to their bottom line. Now, before you left-wingers start whining about big bad business profiteering at the expense of the public, remember, the contract was signed by a socialist NDP government. And another thing, the original scheduled opening date of this road, New Year's Eve. Now, here's an unfamiliar road in the middle of a snowbelt zone with lots of rapidly developing snow squalls being driven on a day when more Canadians are drinking than any other. Whose idea was this? Now, the current government's decided to conduct an independent safety audit of this road, and they've delayed the opening by 3 months. You know, it's too bad these guys can't learn from their mistakes. They'd be geniuses by now. I'm Jim Kenzie.
You know, Volvo has always been a leader in safety, and with the introduction of the 850, they can now add performance to their marquee. But on the subject of safety, would you believe in the future we could have some protection for backseat passengers? And I'm not talking about an airbag. It would be a blanket, an actual blanket that would drop down over the backseat passengers on impact. Well, I don't know about you, but we might as well be driving tanks out on the highway, and then we'd have nothing to worry about. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll see you next time for more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
We had streamliners on the road until 1955, and they were decommissioned or taken off the road in 1955. Why? Honestly, I don't know why they weren't kept around or maintained after that, but the reality is that they were simply let go, and they were tended to disperse across the continent.
TSN's Motoring 97 has been brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will, and Midas, the way it should be.